This morning, inside your spotlight, we welcome back the Minister of Public Utilities, the Honorable Marvin Gonzales. Good morning to you,
Good
Minister.
morning, Rockus.
How
Good
are you
morning,
doing this
Trinidad and
morning?
Tobago, and good morning to Lopino Borneo West. We had our constituency conference last night. It concluded around 9 or 10 o'clock last night. So,
Did you say it was productive?
It was very productive. Very energetic constituency conference. We installed our new executive and party groups, etc. So all of the organs of the constituency are now in place, and their first mandate is to identify a suitable candidate to represent the constituency for 2025.
Well, we'll see how that goes.
We'll see how that goes.
All right, but we have to talk to you in your capacity as the Minister of Public Utilities. We're in the rainy season, and for some people that means water reach. Is that the case?
That is not the case. As a matter of fact, the data from the Met Office would have indicated that the amount of rainfall that we were expected at this time of the year is significantly lower than anticipated.
Really?
Right? And sometimes what we see is heavy rains falling in some parts of the country, and we automatically assume that our reservoirs are being replenished, and we have gotten out of this water restriction that we have experienced in the very harsh dry season. But that is not the case. Rain falling heavily in Port of Spain does not suggest that it is falling in a major catchment area where our reservoirs are located. For example, in Navet, in Hollis, and Arena. Because oftentimes I'm in my office and I'm seeing heavy rain in Port of Spain, and I call the Met Office and I call some of the senior directors at Wasa to find out whether or not the rain is falling at the reservoirs, the main reservoirs where we are capturing the water, and it's absolutely dry. So in that context, I can tell you, the Navet Reservoir, yesterday when I checked, it was somewhere around 43%. The long-term average at this point in time was expecting to be 65%, or somewhere thereabouts. In Arena Reservoir, the current level is at 31%. The long-term average at this point is somewhere in the 60s. So we are almost half below our expected volumes of water. And in Hollis Reservoir, which is very much surprising, the Hollis Reservoir is a reservoir that rises and drops based on seasonal patterns. And normally, coming out of the dry season into the rainy season, it is one of the reservoirs that will replenish faster than the others. The reality is that rain is not falling in the Hollis catchment area in Valencia, and the Hollis Reservoir is still in its 30s, where it's supposed to have been expected to be in its 60s at this point in time. The only reservoir that is doing quite well, and it's ahead of its long-term average, is the Hillsborough Reservoir, and I'm not too sure whether or not that is as a result of the successful desilting that we did over 2 years ago. We spent over $70 million to desilt that reservoir. And the result of that is that, it is ahead of its long-term average. It is one of the reservoirs that is performing the best in the country. So coming back to your question, yes, we are in the rainy season, but most of our reservoirs are still below average. And in that context, citizens should take note of that and to do our part collectively and individually as citizens to conserve water. Water is a very, very vulnerable substance. It is impacted easily by climate and climatic conditions, sun, rain, extreme weather, etc. And it impacts upon the ability of the water authority to provide all of us with a reliable supply of water.
Break it down for me a little bit, Minister. In terms of how the reservoirs work, right? I in my head, I picture if rain falls in the northern range, that there's the water's flowing down, right? And we have these various catchment areas. Is it that the rain needs to fall in the catchment area, or is there a way that we can direct this water to go to the reservoir?
And that's a very good question. The rain has to fall in the catchment area. Now, remember those reservoirs were built over 80 years ago, and in some instances over 100 years ago. And they have been identified by the experts at that point in time, where you would have most of your rainfall, the rainforest would have been located, and then you have the land topography to be able to construct a reservoir to catch the water and to release it, on a daily basis as the needs require.
Well, what feeds the reservoirs? Not rivers?
So you have, yes, surface water and tributaries flowing from the catchment and the forest
Right.
in the respective areas.
Okay.
So, for example, where Navet is located in central Trinidad is no way connected to the northern range. It is no way connected to west port of Spain.
Right.
Where Hollis is located in Valencia, it is not in any way connected to if rain falls lower down the east-west corridor. So you have to get rain in that particular catchment in the mountain area to be able to trap the water that is flowing into the reservoir from the various tributaries coming out of the forested areas.
Okay, understood. Yeah. So tell me a little bit now about the work that you're doing in the various communities to build capacity,
right.
Because we want to be able to make sure that people not just conserve water, but not having water leaks in the road and that sort of thing happening as well.
Well, we have been looking at the issue of climate change. Climate change is real, and the conversation that we're having, it suggests that the weather patterns have changed significantly to the extent that rain is no longer falling in the areas that it traditionally fell in over the last 100 years.
Right.
Just to give you an example of climate change, there's a part in northern Italy, let me tell you how serious it is, where they produce olives to make olive oil.
Yeah.
And they have been dying for rain. And as a result of that, cannot produce the olive for olive oil. And as a result, olive oil on the world market has skyrocketed over 300%. That's just a simple example of what climate change is doing for us.
I mean, we have real examples every day because we feel in the heat. When we go outside, the way the sun feeling these days is very different. So we are aware of it in Trinidad and Tobago.
It is crazy, and it is impacting on the issue of water because it is directly related to water. Hollis, Navet, North Oropouche, Arena, Hillsborough, those reservoirs have served us tremendously and faithfully over the last 100 years. And as a result of climate change, we are seeing a different output from those reservoirs because they're no longer collecting the volumes of water to be able to provide all of the population wherever we are located. But in addition to that, we have growing population, growing demands on those reservoirs, and we now have to invest heavily on identifying new sources of water to be able to supplement the shortfall from these. We have drilled a number of wells in unserved and underserved communities in central Trinidad, in Tobago, in parts of the east-west corridor. We have drilled successfully recently some wells in the Granville area, where we are looking to increase water production by about 1 million gallons of water. Under the IDB program, we are drilling about 6 wells, again in the Freeport area, in Clark Road, in Pinal, and in Tucker Valley. What we are actually doing there is identifying new sources of water so that we can reduce our reliance on those reservoirs that are no longer producing the volumes of water that they produced years ago.
So you said you've been working on this for the past 4 years or so. When can the public expect to see the impact of these?
They have already been seeing improvements. So last year we commissioned 3 wells in the Freeport area, and we supplemented water or added 1 million gallons of water in the Freeport water treatment plant. And those communities that depend on the Freeport water treatment plant, they have seen a significant improvement in the supply of water. Under the IDB program, we are drilling 3 more wells in the Freeport area to expand again water production by a further 1 million gallons of water. So they will see a continuous improvement in the supply of water. In Mary's Hill and Tobago, we drill a number of wells. And I can tell you, Rockers, because of the rough dry season that we have experienced earlier on this year, the Quallen River almost went to a very trickle. Not a gallon of water is being pumped from the Quallen River to provide water to southwest Tobago. Luckily, we drilled 3 wells in the Mary's Hill area, and those wells provided water to southwest Tobago. Because had we not done so, the whole of the southwest Tobago, which is Crown Point and those surrounding areas, would have been without water, and it would have completely shut down the tourism industry in southwest Tobago. So to answer your question, many communities in Trinidad and Tobago have already started experiencing and seeing an improvement in the supply of water. In the next 2 or 3 months, we will be commissioning, in addition to the Freeport wells, we'll be commissioning about 10 wells in Granville, in Palo Seco, in Cedros, and Santa Flora. those areas suffered for water for years, but they depended on the traditional reservoirs because as communities expanded all over Trinidad and Tobago, we over the years depended on the same source of water to provide to expanding communities. That did not make sense. It is a recipe for disaster. And the effect of climate change has caught up on us where we now really and desperately have to try and get new sources of water. And that is what we have been doing over the last 4 years. This is what we will continue to focus on in the coming 12 months. And I'm happy to say that those communities in Santa Flora, in Cedros and Granville, Southwest Trinidad, Mayaro, Moruga, those are the areas that we are focusing on. And when we get those wells into production, those communities will no longer have to depend on water from the Navet water treatment plant. We can now retract water from the Navet water treatment plant to send to other areas that require the water, and that is exactly.
But if it barely have water, how we sending it anywhere else?
But imagine the reservoirs are not producing as they're producing now, but you have to supply all those communities. You remove those communities from their reliance from it, and you now have additional water because you're talking about getting 5 or 6 million gallons of water, and if we get good producing wells, we can get over 8 million gallons of water. That is 8 million gallons of water less you have to depend on those existing reservoirs to get to those communities. But we are looking at localizing the source of water because, for example, the Arena Reservoir is located somewhere in the east. Water flows into the Caroni water treatment plant, which is at Piaco, producing 75 million gallons of water. That water from the Caroni water treatment plant reaches all the way down to La Brea, and in the west, all down the way to Cocorite. That is the expanse that the water travels. By localizing the source of water, the water no longer will have to go to some of those communities. Those communities will now have access to their local source of water from those wells, and you reduce your dependence on the Caroni water treatment plant.
Does it also increase the pressure of the water?
It will reduce the pressure because you would no longer would require pressure from the source to boost the water all the way down to, for example, Mayaro, and all the way down to Cedros and some of those areas.
Now, recently, earlier in August, I believe it was, the Wasa had a big notice that we were going to shut down things for a couple of days so that we could have some upgrades. How were those upgrades?
Very successful. There were 32, I think it was about 20-something or 30-something projects that had to be done to upgrade the Caroni water treatment plant, put in new electricals, etc., in the installation of bulk meters, the refurbishment of major booster offtakes and booster stations of the Caroni water treatment plant. And it was a shutdown that lasted from the Friday at 12 noon to late Sunday and some parts of Monday. And I must say, based on the collaboration of TNTech and the men and women at the authority, the works were seamlessly executed. There was a challenge as a result of the weather condition in El Socorro. We were able to ramp up resources, and I must say, coming out of that experience, we can now use that as a blueprint for further maintenance work on some of our critical plants around the country. So it has been a tremendous success for Wasa and TNTech, and by, let's say, Sunday around 7 p.m. or I think it was about midday, water was restored to the Caroni South transmission system. So as a matter of fact, it was 7 a.m. on Sunday, and the water was supposed to be returned by after 12. So it has been a tremendous success, I must say.
Now, Minister, quickly before we go, we have like a minute left, but I really want to ask about the CEO for Wasa, because I know somebody was chosen, and unfortunately he would have passed away. So do we have a replacement ready to go?
Yes, so the board engaged discussions and negotiations with the second ranked candidate, and I'm happy to report that those negotiations were successfully concluded, and there were some other positions like Director of Finance, Director of Water Management Services, where they had to fill as part of the entire suite of executive leadership. And so these were completed last week, and very soon the board is going to be making an announcement to the country with respect to the new executive leadership, which of course will include the appointment of a chief executive officer.
When you say very soon, days, weeks?
I would say maybe days, it could be weeks.
You sure you don't want to just announce it here one time on the normal?
That's not my responsibility. That's the board's responsibility. That's the responsibility of the minister.
I figure I'll give it a try and see what we can get now, you know. Ladies and gentlemen, the Honorable Marvin Gonzales, Minister of Public Utilities, joining us to give us an update on what's going on at Wasa, and we're looking forward to more updates coming out soon.
Certainly. We look forward to that.
All right, thank you very much for joining us this morning, Minister.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
No problem. We'll take a quick break and we come back with more in our morning show. Stick around.